Michael felt the chill first. A thin, unnatural silence rolling through the trading floor, like the air itself was holding its breath. He had seen markets panic, crash, rage, and roar, but never pause. Not like this. A single frozen line of data blinked on his screen, an impossible number that shouldn't exist. A shadow in the system hinting at something buried far deeper than any algorithm could explain. He leaned closer, pulse rising, sensing the kind of danger that didn't announce itself with alarms but with whispers. Elena watched him from across the aisle, sensing something that shouldn't be touched. One figure, one anomaly, small enough to miss, dangerous enough to ruin lives. What kind of empire could shape the world and leave no fingerprints? And worse, what if this empire had just noticed he was looking? Michael replayed the anomaly in his mind, gripping the uneasy feeling that something ancient and powerful had stirred beneath the surface. Elena warned him not to jump to conclusions, but he felt cornered by the possibility that their entire industry might have been built on a lie no one ever questioned. Every instinct told him this wasn't just a glitch. It felt like a locked door shifting open, revealing a world not meant for people like them. He wondered if pursuing the truth would cost him everything he built, or if ignoring it would cost even more. Hours passed, and the deeper Michael searched, the more the numbers told a story that felt wrong. Patterns buried under decades of transactions whispered the same disturbing rhythm. Elena urged caution, but he sensed a hidden hand shaping global markets long before they were born. If this was real, the magnitude wasn't just financial, it was personal. A quiet reshaping of the world that touched every life without ever being seen. Michael felt the weight of history pressing against him. These weren't just numbers. They were footprints of an invisible giant. Every discovery made him question who had the power to manipulate entire eras of prosperity and collapse without appearing in a single record. Elena stood close, torn between fear and loyalty, as he pushed forward, determined to find the truth no matter what it revealed. By the time they left the archives, Michael felt changed. The night air outside bit into his skin, sharpening the realization that they were now entangled in something far beyond market trends or data anomalies. Someone, somewhere, had built a hidden empire powerful enough to bend history, and now he knew it existed. The question wasn't whether it was real. The question was what it wanted. Michael returned to the office before sunrise, carrying the tightness of a man who knew he'd crossed an invisible boundary. The anomaly haunted him. It didn't feel like data anymore. It felt like a warning. Elena tried to steady him, reminding him that chasing shadows was how people got destroyed in their industry, but her voice carried its own tremor. He couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched, that the building itself had shifted overnight, as if adjusting to their discovery. Every screen flicker, every fluorescent hum felt deliberate. Someone out there had built a financial empire so deep in the world's foundation that it could rewrite reality without leaving a trace. And now Michael feared that acknowledging it had painted a target on their backs. He promised himself he wouldn't run, but a quiet panic spread inside him as he wondered how far the empire's reach truly extended. As the morning rush filled the floor, Michael felt disconnected from the chaos, hearing only the echo of that hidden pattern whispering through the data. Elena urged him to act normal, but he could sense the weight of something closing in. The markets moved with an eerie smoothness, like currents guided by unseen hands, rather than global forces. He wondered how many people lived their entire lives, shaped by decisions made in rooms they'd never know existed. A powerful unease settled in his chest. If this empire truly controlled the flow of money, it also controlled the flow of opportunity, loss, and survival. Elena caught his stare and realized he wasn't just frightened. He was angry. Angry at the idea that the world might not be chaotic after all, but engineered with quiet precision by someone who believed no one would ever notice. Michael and Elena retreated to a quieter conference room, but the silence only amplified his dread. He laid out the patterns, head uncovered, watching Elena's skepticism fade as the pieces aligned with chilling accuracy. She whispered that this couldn't be an accident. Decades of perfectly timed shifts in global markets forming a hidden rhythm too precise for chance. Michael felt the room shrink as he realized they were now holding a map of influence that could devastate economies if mishandled. He felt torn between exposing the truth and protecting the world from the consequences of knowing it. Elena urged him to breathe, reminding him that information this powerful didn't just disappear. Whoever had created this empire had gone to extraordinary lengths to remain invisible, and discovering them might be the most dangerous thing either of them ever did. Michael's instincts pushed him deeper into the data, chasing the hidden signature of the unseen architects. He found old transactions buried in forgotten corners of international banking systems, small, precise, impossibly coordinated. Elena stood behind him, her voice steady but anxious as she urged caution. Michael felt torn between fear and obsession, convinced that every clue they uncovered pulled them closer not only to the truth, but to the people determined to protect. The numbers began forming a timeline, a history of manipulation stretching across generations. Whoever controlled this empire didn't just move money, they moved destiny. The thought chilled him as he realized that exposing them might tear the world apart, yet leaving them hidden meant surrendering humanity's future to hands no one could see. The day ended with a heaviness that felt impossible to shake. Michael closed his laptop slowly, knowing he couldn't turn back from what they had uncovered. Elena stood with him at the window overlooking the sprawling city, both feeling the quiet truth settling in. The world looked normal, only because the Empire wanted it to. For the first time, Michael wondered whether knowledge itself was a threat, whether by seeing the cracks, they had become part of the story they were trying to understand. He feared the next steps, yet felt a rising determination, a need to face the truth no matter the cost. Elena watched him closely, sensing the storm forming inside him and knowing they were stepping into a conflict neither of them were prepared for. Michael couldn't shake the sense that every new discovery rewired the past. The deeper he dug, the more history felt like a script written by someone who never expected to be caught. Elena watched him struggle with the weight of it, knowing he was trying to hold onto a world that suddenly felt manufactured. As they combed through decades of coordinated shifts, Michael realized the Empire didn't just influence crises. It designed them. Each collapse, each rebound, each sudden global shift mapped perfectly onto a pattern only visible now that he knew where to look. He felt anger rising, but beneath it trembled fear. If the Empire crafted history with such precision, then finding the truth meant stepping into a story already written, where their roles might be smaller and far more dangerous than he wanted to believe. Elena spread out files across the table, tracing the Empire's influence through decades of silent manipulation. Michael felt his pulse spike as he recognized how major world events aligned with those hidden fingerprints. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. Someone had crafted the financial tides that shaped nations, families, futures. Elena whispered that exposing this could fracture global stability, and Michael felt the sting of truth. Some knowledge wasn't just dangerous, it was destabilizing. Yet every instinct inside him refused to look away. He needed to know who had built this empire and why they had remained buried for so long. As day turned to dusk, Michael noticed a strange silence settling over the office, as if the building itself sensed they'd uncovered too much. Elena urged him to rest, but he found something new. An old transaction trail that shouldn't exist, connected to banks long dissolved. He felt a cold shiver creep down his spine. These weren't mistakes. They were deliberate shadows, footprints designed to be invisible. Elena saw his expression shift and understood they were standing on the edge of something enormous, something that reached beyond finance into the very machinery of global power. Michael's voice cracked as he admitted he didn't know how far this went, but he feared it reached everywhere. They moved to a secured analytics room. The hum of servers echoing like a heartbeat. Michael loaded the data into an isolated system, watching as decades of patterns converged into a single undeniable truth. The Empire had shaped every modern recession and recovery with devastating precision. Elena whispered that this wasn't financial strategy, it was orchestration. Michael felt torn between the horror of discovery and the relentless pull to understand the mastermind behind it all. Whoever ran this empire didn't just predict future events, they designed them. And now Michael sensed that the Empire's gaze might finally be turning toward him. Night settled over the city as Michael stepped away from the data, feeling the crushing truth sink deeper into his chest. Elena joined him, standing quietly, as the glow of the skyline stretched across the window. Michael whispered that the Empire didn't just move money. It moved time, opportunity, and fate. Every person on the planet lived in a world shaped by decisions they never saw, made by people they would never meet. Elena touched his shoulder, telling him they still had a choice. Stay silent or confront the machine that defined reality. Michael stared out at the city, realizing that searching for the truth meant risking everything. But the thought of walking away felt even more dangerous. Michael woke with the uneasy certainty that the Empire was no longer a distant force, but something closing in on him. The data they uncovered had crossed a line, and the world around him felt sharper, quieter, as if listening. Elena tried to convince him they still had control, but doubt carved its way into his thoughts. Every pattern he traced led to a deeper, older structure, an intelligence woven through financial history like a hidden spine. He felt torn between the guilt of knowing too much and the fear of what would happen if they stopped now. Stepping into the office felt like walking into a storm he could sense but couldn't see. Elena kept close, aware that whatever they discovered next could shatter everything they understood about power, truth, and the fragile balance holding the world together. Michael and Elena locked themselves in a private workspace, isolating their systems from the firm's network. The deeper they analyzed the timeline of hidden financial manipulations, the clearer the Empire's fingerprints became. A sequence of perfectly timed events, currency shifts, sudden policy pivots, global downturns, aligned with chilling symmetry. Michael felt his chest tighten as the implications settled in. This wasn't a reactive entity. It was predictive, almost prophetic in its precision. Elena steadied him, reminding him that truth demanded courage, but he could see fear growing behind her resolve. They were peeling back the layers of a force that behaved less like an institution and more like something omnipresent, with motives they still couldn't decipher. As evening drew near, Michael uncovered something that made his breath hitch. A connection leading back to a single entity that had survived every financial era without ever appearing in public records. Elena studied the name, a faint imprint, buried in layers of transactions, as if someone had tried to erase it, while ensuring it could still be found by those persistent enough. Michael felt a cold sense of inevitability rising within him. This wasn't just a hidden firm. This was the origin point, the architect, the heart of the Empire. Elena whispered that knowing this made them vulnerable, and Michael understood she was right. They were standing at the threshold of a truth people had been kept from for generations, and stepping further meant accepting that they might never return to their old lives. The room felt smaller as Michael and Elena pieced together the Empire's structure. It wasn't a corporation, at least not in the traditional sense. It was a lineage of power, passed quietly through time, operating in shadows, steering global markets with ruthless precision. Michael felt the air thicken as he realized the Empire's influence stretched into governments, industries, and institutions believed to be independent. Elena urged him to step back to breathe, but he felt trapped between awe and terror. The Empire wasn't an enemy they could confront or expose easily. It was a system designed to survive any threat, including them. And now, by tracing its origins, they had placed themselves directly in its path. Night fell heavy over the city as Michael stood by the window, feeling the enormity of what they'd uncovered settle into his bones. Elena joined him, her voice softer now. admitting she feared the Empire had already noticed their intrusion. Michael stared at the glowing skyline, each light representing a life unknowingly shaped by invisible hands. He felt a rising determination. Fearful, yes, but undeniable. Someone had rewritten history for their own design, and he could no longer pretend he didn't know. Elena touched his arm gently, reminding him that whatever they chose next would change everything. Michael nodded, understanding that the road ahead wouldn't just reveal truth, it would expose them to a force built to outlast nations. Michael felt the world narrowing around him as new files revealed the Empire's reach into sectors he once believed were immune. Each record showed a decision disguised as coincidence, a shift that looked natural until he traced it back to the same invisible source. Elena tried to reassure him, but he could see the fear she hid behind steady words. The truth weighed on him. This wasn't just hidden influence, it was control, absolute and unquestioned. Every market surge, every collapse, every sudden shift in global confidence aligned with the Empire's silent direction. Michael felt torn between outrage and helplessness, realizing the world had never been free, only managed. He wondered if exposing this truth would free people, or destroy them, and the uncertainty clawed at him as he tried to hold on to something real in a world built on manipulation. They cross-referenced the Empire's oldest transactions, building a map of influence that stretched across continents and decades. Michael felt sick as he realized entire national recoveries and collapses had been steered with machine-like calculation. Elena reminded him softly that history's biggest tragedies often began with secrets like these, hidden behind numbers no one questioned. Michael felt the crushing awareness that revealing the truth meant destabilizing everything, but silence meant allowing the Empire's grip to tighten. The conflict inside him deepened, twisting into doubt as he wondered whether anyone would even believe them. Michael uncovered a series of coded signals embedded within international transfers, timed patterns that acted like commands. Elena watched the realization freeze him, understanding that these signals weren't just records, but instructions sent through the world's financial arteries. The Empire wasn't just reactive. It was alive in the infrastructure itself. Michael felt the room close in as he imagined a network powerful enough to act without oversight, without borders, without resistance. Elena whispered that this changed everything, and he felt the truth settle like ice. They weren't uncovering a human-controlled system. They were uncovering something more embedded, more enduring, something that might continue whether its creators survived or not. The more Michael studied the Empire's commands, the more he realized they formed a pattern too intricate for a single generation to design. Elena steadied him as he pieced together the disturbing truth. The Empire had evolved, adapting across eras, shaping itself through the failures and victories of every financial age. Michael felt torn between admiration and terror, recognizing a brilliance built on control rather than freedom. Elena urged him to step back, but he couldn't. The deeper he went, the more he felt the Empire watching, responding, adjusting. For the first time, he wondered if exposing it was even possible, or if the Empire had already calculated this moment long before he arrived at it. That night, Michael stood near the window, eyes fixed on the sprawling city below, trying to grasp the enormity of what they had unearthed. Elena joined him quietly, sensing the storm building inside him. He admitted he no longer knew whether the Empire was a man-made machine or something that had grown beyond its creators. The idea rattled him. A structure so intertwined with global systems that stopping it might collapse the very stability people depended on. Elena told him they still had a choice. But he felt that choice shrinking. The Empire wasn't hiding anymore. It was waiting. And Michael knew that whatever came next would pull them into a confrontation far larger than the truth they sought. Michael felt the walls closing in as the first signs of retaliation surfaced, accounts freezing for seconds at a time, access logs showing entries he didn't make, and quiet alerts appearing on systems he had never touched. Elena stayed close, pretending calm, but her eyes exposed the dread neither of them could voice. The Empire wasn't reacting with panic or aggression. It was responding with precision, almost like a teacher correcting a student who strayed too far. Michael realized the danger wasn't in being attacked. It was in being noticed. Every step forward felt like walking across thin ice, hearing the faint cracks beneath their feet. He sensed the Empire probing, learning their patterns, adjusting its defenses as if preparing to decide whether they were a threat or simply too insignificant to matter. That uncertainty haunted him more than anything. They retreated to an off-site location, hoping distance would slow the Empire's awareness. But Michael quickly realized distance didn't matter. The patterns followed them, adjusting with unsettling ease. Elena traced new anomalies and found movements in global markets that mirrored their recent research. A chilling sign that the Empire was counterbalancing their investigation by shifting the world itself. Michael felt his stomach twist as he realized they had triggered a response too massive to comprehend. Elena whispered that maybe the Empire wasn't targeting them, but repositioning, closing gaps they had uncovered. The idea made Michael's skin crawl. The world wasn't reacting to them. The Empire was. Michael worked through the night, ignoring the ache in his shoulders as he followed a new trail, one that seemed to anticipate his every move. Elena urged him to rest, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire was watching him through the very systems he used. The more he analyzed, the more the path curved subtly, guiding him toward conclusions as if the Empire wanted him to see something. A message hidden in the noise, a nudge toward a truth he didn't yet understand. Michael felt torn between curiosity and fear, wondering if he was discovering the Empire, or if the Empire was revealing itself to him intentionally. As dawn crept in, Michael found a pattern unlike anything before. A synchronizing rhythm pulsing through international networks, coordinating subtle shifts across markets in real time. Elena watched as he traced the motion, realizing it wasn't random data but communication. Michael felt his breath catch. The Empire wasn't operating like a hidden boardroom or a secret syndicate. It behaved like an organism, reactive, adaptive learning. Elena whispered that they were no longer uncovering history. They were witnessing the Empire as it lived, breathed, and responded. Michael felt fear coil inside him, understanding now that this was not a system built by human hands alone. It had become something more. Michael stood by the window long after the data stopped moving, trying to understand the scale of what they had uncovered. Elena joined him, both silent as the city below carried on unaware. The Empire didn't rule through fear or violence. It ruled through inevitability, shaping the world so seamlessly that no one ever questioned its existence. Michael realized the truth they carried could fracture global trust, unravel economies, and ignite panic across nations. Yet, keeping it hidden felt like surrendering humanity's future to a force no one chose. Elena gently asked him what came next, but Michael couldn't answer. For the first time, he wasn't sure if exposing the Empire would save the world or break it. Michael felt the final pieces closing in as if the world had shifted into a narrow corridor with no exits. Every doubt, every fear, every unanswered question pressed against him as he realized the Empire wasn't just responding. It was waiting. Elena watched him struggle to breathe through the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He knew the truth they carried could shatter the quiet stability people depended on. Yet, letting it remain hidden meant surrendering the future to an unseen power. The choice felt impossible. He wondered whether humanity was stronger with the illusion of freedom or with the burden of truth. Elena whispered that they had come too far to turn back, and as Michael stared at the glowing screens, he understood. The Empire wasn't concerned with being exposed. It was concerned with being misunderstood. Michael and Elena stood over the final model, a sprawling timeline that revealed the Empire's complete design. Every crisis, recovery, and shift aligned with a logic that transcended borders and politics. Elena suggested releasing the information anonymously, but Michael hesitated. The world wasn't ready to know that its foundations had been guided by a force operating beyond any nation. He felt torn between truth and protection, between justice and chaos. Elena reminded him that people deserve to understand the forces that shape their lives, even if it terrified them. Michael felt the weight of her words settle, understanding that silence would only feed the myth of free markets, while the empire continued its quiet reign. As evening settled, Michael found himself staring at a folder containing everything they had uncovered. Elena waited patiently, sensing that he needed space to confront the enormity of the truth. He felt a quiet grief for the world he once believed in, a world where markets were unpredictable, where nations acted on their own terms. Now he saw the truth. Humanity had never steered its own course. Deep inside, he feared people might break under this knowledge. Elena stepped closer, telling him that hiding the truth was just another kind of control. Michael knew she was right, yet the fear remained. Exposing the empire could dismantle the very systems that kept millions alive. Michael opened the encrypted channel, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat, counting down to the moment that would change everything. Elena watched as he hesitated, knowing the decision could fracture global trust, but also free the world from invisible chains. Michael felt the weight of centuries pressing at his fingertips. If he sent this, people would see the truth behind every recession and boom, every policy shift, every sudden collapse. They would see the empire for what it was, a force that shaped the world without ever asking for consent. He exhaled slowly, realizing the choice wasn't between order and chaos, but between blind dependence and conscious responsibility. And that responsibility no longer belonged to the empire. It belonged to them. The message sent, Michael and Elena stood side by side at the window, watching the city breathe beneath them. Nothing changed at first. No alarms, no blackouts, no sudden collapse. The world continued, unaware that its deepest secret had just been released. Michael felt an unexpected calm settle in. He realized the empire's power had never been in secrecy alone. It had been in the belief that it was necessary. Elena whispered that the world would now have to choose how to rebuild, and for the first time, Michael believed it was possible. The empire would adapt, but so would humanity. As dawn began to rise, he understood they hadn't destroyed the empire. They had simply given the world a chance to see it clearly, and that clarity was the beginning of freedom.